Yeah, and when I talk about the non-intuitive aspects from a business leader standpoint, one of the early challenges that I had with HP was we were going to put out a brand new server, and this new server had a new networking board, and this server was going to run both Windows, HPUX, Unix, as well as Linux. So it had a 3 operating system model. And the Linux portion was about 25% was what they were estimating would be the sales for this server. And very, very late in the distribution of this server, there was a bug found in one of these, in this most famous network card or most popular network card for this type of server. And it was a bug in the firmware. And they looked at it, and they figured out, okay, so if we just rewrite the driver a little bit so that we don't access this particular feature on the firmware, we'll be okay. So they went to the Windows team, said, hey, please fix this driver so that it doesn't do this on this card. Windows folks said yes. Went to the Unix folks and HPUX. Unix folks said yes. Came to the Linux team and said, would you make this change so that this driver doesn't access this particular firmware feature? And we said, yeah, sorry, can't do that. We, tell us when your firmware is fixed, because otherwise we're not going to be able to ship that card with Linux. And that caused quite a stir. It actually went all the way to the CEO. Because that was counterintuitive. You make this simple fix to get this product out so that you have time to market. Because anytime you're not making time to market is dollars lost for the company. So we had to explain to the CEO of HP at the time, which was Carly Fiorini at the time, that if we were to do this or try to do this, well, first we would have to get that fix put into, and that driver change put up into the Linux kernel community, because we were working with Red Hat, and Red Hat has a policy of only pulling from the upstream open source community. And this is part of the reason why. So we would have to actually put that change into the Linux community, and it would immediately get rejected, because in the principle of keep it simple and don't aspire to any technical debt that isn't really, really necessary. It was just a standard policy that you don't make an if-def type of a statement that works around a piece of hardware failure. It's bad form. And I can tell you from looking at code such as HPUX and other Unixes that after 20 years of development, they have a whole bunch of cruft like that. And everybody's afraid to touch it because it's old and they don't even know if those cards still exist or not. So that type of cruft just makes software very difficult to maintain. So having a very technical excellence policy of we don't allow that, period. And we had to explain that to the CEO, and we had to tell her that, if we were to try this, not only would it not be accepted, but the person who tried to submit it would lose his reputation as a quality engineer, trying to protect the simplicity and the quality of Linux. And so anything that person would try to submit in the future was going to be scrutinized very closely. So he would lose reputation, and that would be ultimately very bad for Hewlett Packard. And so that's a counter to an intuitive example. I've got another one where we had a developer who had to slow down a release of one of our products to help a competitor at Dell. This was also at Hewlett Packard. But we had to explain to the manager who was pushing back on this that if we didn't let this happen, ultimately we also needed this feature. It was just we only needed it, about 6 to 8 months from when it would be introduced, with Dell introducing it instead of us. But if we didn't help them along the way with exactly what it would look like, mentor them as to what would be the right way to implement this particular feature in this particular standard, then we would ultimately pay the price for that, and we would have to do a big rewrite. It would cause all kinds of turmoil in the community, and everything would just take longer. So if we just paused, helped our competitor do this collaborative thing in the open that we were ultimately going to need, our life would be much better, and our delivery schedule would be less impacted in the long term by allowing this to happen. It's counterintuitive, right? But it's looking at the long view as opposed to the short view, and technical excellence and how that pays off in the future. For me, those are some of the best practices around open source communities, and that creation, when you have multiple companies working in the same community, it means that no one company can dominate a release schedule for a marketing or time to market reason, as opposed to technical excellence. And I know that that also frustrates business leaders very much when they can't figure out exactly what features at what time frame some piece of open source software is going to be delivered. But the reason for that is because technical excellence takes precedence. And in the long run, less technical debt is better.